in this segment, we will discuss access keywords and how that affects inheritance. So in this segment, when I'm talking about the access keywords, I mean the keywords that are within the classes, such as public, privates, and also public and protected. So public, we're aware of, is when data or functions are public that any party can access them. When we have private members of a base class, as we had alluded before, no code or classes outside of that class can access the private data. But it is also possible for us to declare access with the protected keyword. And what the protected keyword does is it makes that data or function members private to any object or code not inheriting from the base class, but it's accessible by any derived class. So let's look at the impact of this. So for example, we mentioned before that the person class has a name and ID, and the student inherits publicly from person. And if that data is private, the student objects cannot access it directly. So for example, our print grade report function would not compile because the complaint would be, well, name is not accessible to student because it's private in the base, so we couldn't access it. But if instead, rather than making the data private, we made name and ID protected, then this would compile. Because when the data is protected, a derived class can access it. So when it's protected, the derived class can access it. When it's private, derived class cannot access. So you can see now protected is an access that permits inherited classes to be able to access the data that is relevant to it in the base class, whether it be data or members or member functions. Now let's take a brief look at private access, what it means if we have members, data members or function members in a base class which are labeled private. If it's labeled private, that means no derived class can access the private data, and no third-party classes or functions can access it. So main definitely cannot access private data of a base class, and the derived classes cannot even access private data of its base class. So basically, if the data is private, no other classes or functions can access that data outside of that class, that base class. If it's protected, if data members or functions are protected in the base class, that means that third-party classes or functions like main cannot access that protected data or functions. But here you'll notice this is the main change, is that now derived classes can access the protected data members and functions of the base class. So that is the benefit for protected. So you can think of protected access permits inherited classes to access data and functions that are protected. And you can use this in order to give derived classes access to data members or functions that will actually help them in however they're extending the capabilities of the base class or adding specificity to them. And then finally, If you have public base members or data members or functions, then it's basically any derived class or any third-party class or function such as main can access those public functions or data members directly. So public is the access that, and that's usually what we use to specify an interface. In the next segment, we are going to again be looking at public, private, and protected, but now we're going to see the interplay between the access keywords that we just discussed within a class and when these keywords are dealing with the type of inheritance of the base class.